Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 26 series, Rescue the Rockies. And for the first time in 3 seasons, our 2040 Colorado Rockies are your World Series champions. 111 wins, best in baseball in the regular season, and a relatively straightforward run through the playoffs. Took out the Mets 3-0 in the NLDS. 6-game series against the St. Louis Cardinals, and then took us just 5 games to dispatch the Boston Red Sox on the way to our 7th title with this Colorado Rockies franchise. So the offseason is ready to get underway. Before we start moving forward, as we always do, we will do our annual roster review in this episode and start thinking about the upcoming off season and what we may need to do to improve things. Overall, a very strong team, as I noted, 111 wins. That was 3 games above expectations. 11-5 record in extra inning games, 30-18 in one-run games. Could likely see a bit of reversion towards the mean in those categories next year. The offense ended up being very good, second in the league in runs scored. You can see we're first, second, or third in most of the offensive categories. Batting average and hits, we were more a middle of the league type of ranking, as well as in strikeouts. First in the league in steals, base running, however, we were middle of the pack when all was said and done, ranking 9th. Very good defense, second in defensive efficiency, first in zone rating, and the pitching ended up being outstanding. First in the National League in runs allowed, and you can see first or second ranked team in all of the primary pitching categories. Turning to our pitching, as we think about this roster and start preparing for next season, I don't think we're going to really need to change too much. We will be almost certainly moving on from our longtime closer, Adonis Valer, tore his rotator cuff in the playoffs, set to become a free agent. He had a very strong year for us, 7-4 record with 46 saves and a 1.70 earned run average, put up a 2.8 WAR for us. So he has been excellent for us since we picked him up many years ago at this point in a trade with the Padres. But given that he's going to be 31 years old soon, coming off of a torn rotator cuff, and he's still looking for $22 million-ish a year for 4 seasons, probably time to move on from Valer. The only other pitcher to mention is Jason Axelson, who's going to miss all of next year with a torn rotator cuff. Former 5th-round pick, given his lack of control, we probably will just waive and DFA him this offseason to avoid guaranteeing him a major league contract, and we know that he's not going to play next year and probably not a particularly important part of our future. Looking at the rest of the pitching staff, however, feel like our rotation is likely to all be coming back next year. Leo Martinez, the now 30-year-old veteran, 3-time Cy Young Award winner, 16-8, led the National League with 199 2/3 innings pitched and put up an NL best 4.6 WAR. The righty signed for several more seasons to that very long contract we gave him when he was quite unproven, and expecting him to remain a cornerstone of this team going forward. Similar with Bob Russell, a guy we traded for 4 years ago at this point from Atlanta, who has become our number 2 starter. 9-7 record this year, 372 earned run average. So the wins and the ERA were not particularly, in the case of wins, what we've gotten used to from him. But he did lead the NL in quality start percentage, put up a 3.8 WAR, which is the best that we have ever gotten from him, except for his first year with us when he put up a 4.8 WAR when he led the league with 16 wins. Best performance since then. He'll be turning 30 years old shortly. He's signed for the next several seasons. and likely to remain a very important part of our rotation. Signed Bernie Barrera to a shorter extension of 3 years last offseason, so he'll be with us next year before he's got a player option. Led the National League in wins for a second time, 17-7 record. Led the National League with a 110 whip and put up a 4 WAR. Love that his injury proneness is that rare Iron Man. Can pretty much count on him to go out and give us 30-plus games every year. Not the most impressive profile in the world, but you look at what he's done over the course of his career, and he has become a very important pitcher for us over the years. Really like some of the younger guys towards the back end of our rotation. Righty Jesse Hoffmeister, former second-round pick, 15-6 with a 3.43 ERA. His first year as a full-time starter for us, turned 27 in August. He's in a situation now where he is arbitration eligible, going to be making over $4 million next year. Don't love that he's fragile physically, but he has some absolutely filthy stuff, and put up a 3.6 WAR for us, 2.45 Sierra. Expect that he will remain very effective as long as he's healthy. And last but not least, Mike Witherspoon, 23-year-old former first-round pick, still listed as the number 58 prospect in baseball. First full year in the majors, 10-7 record with a 3.94 ERA, put up a 1.4 WAR. As a number 5 starter, I think you could do a lot worse than Mike Witherspoon. Our hope is that perhaps his control and a couple of his off pitches still can get a little bit better in the coming off seasons as well. So I don't feel like there's much we need to do in terms of the starting rotation. And as I kind of alluded to earlier, don't really feel like there's a lot we need to do in the bullpen either. Eric Schweitzer, the right-hander out of Germany, who we picked up 7 years ago at this point when we traded away Drew Romo to the White Sox, has developed into a very good pitcher for us. 1.46 earned run average over 49 1/3 innings pitched. He took over as the closer in the playoffs after Adonis Valer got hurt, and anticipate giving him the opportunity to be our 9th inning specialist next year. Setup men, Chris Kennedy in a setup/stopper role, led the league in games pitched and holds for a second straight year, 2.06 ERA with 149 strikeouts, over 100 in 2/3 innings pitched, put up a 4 WAR working out of the bullpen. He is already a 2-time Mariano Rivera Award winner, and I would expect that he will be a pretty strong candidate to add a 3rd Mariano Rivera Award this season. Righty Josh Joss, 6-1 record with a save for us, put up a 1.74 ERA over 67 1/3 innings pitched. Only criticisms of him, doesn't have the greatest control in the world, not good at holding on runners, but he has been a very effective pitcher for us over the years, and he is signed for another few seasons. Lefty Jason McKinney, 115 earned run average over 54 2/3 innings with 60 strikeouts, allowed just 1 home run in those 54 2/3 innings. He's typically been a lefty specialist for us, but particularly with Valer going down and McKinney really blossoming over the last year or so in terms of some of his ratings. I'm going to view him as more of a normal setup guy who we can hopefully get 70 or 80 innings out of next season. Righty Jeff Colson, former first-round draft pick, spent the year in the majors with us, 3.50 ERA over 54 innings pitched. Probably a long reliever for us. His stamina has really regressed over the past few years. Always viewed him as a potential starter when we thought his stamina could be a bit higher with a potential 6-pitch arsenal. But with the number of injuries he's had over the years, you can see he pitched in only 22 games combined in 2038 and 2039. seems to have really sapped his stamina, so view him as a middle and long reliever for us going forward. Melvin Reyes, 27-year-old former IAFA signing, 0-3 record with a 4.82 ERA over 46 and 2/3 innings pitched. Slightly above replacement level, certainly not nearly as good as he was a year ago when he had a sub-1 ERA for us. Arbitration eligible, set to make about $4 million next year. But looking at his ratings and his durability, would certainly anticipate that he will be back as a setup man or middle reliever for us as well. Lefty David Guadron, another former first-round pick out of Illinois Springfield. Doesn't look like he's going to become what we hoped he might. Started just 2 games for us after being our 5th starter last year, only 2 starts this season, but put up a 3.28 ERA and 82 1/3 innings pitched, 1.3 WAR. He is still a guy who, at hopefully a little less than $6 million, is affordable for us. Don't think he's a guy that's going to be with us for the long term, but does give us another left-handed arm out of the bullpen. And given, as we talked about, the decline in Colson's stamina, Guadron would probably be the first pitcher that we would use if we were to have some injuries in the starting rotation. Jason House, the potential two-way player, had a 4.41 ERA for us this year over 16 1/3 innings pitched, was below replacement level. When we look at his pitching ratings, his stuff is not that impressive. His movement and his control are average. Basically, just look at him as a guy who can do some mop-up work for us or some long relief if it's a day where our bullpen has been taxed over the previous few days and we just need somebody to eat some innings. A couple other guys who probably aren't really part of our long-term plans. Phil Laughlin, former 6th-round pick, made his major league debut at the end of the year, didn't allow a run over 6 1/3 innings. Looking at his ratings, looks like he could be a perfectly acceptable middle reliever, but probably nothing more than that. Salvatore Alvarez, picked him up in a trade with Cleveland a couple of years ago. Finally made his major league debut with us also. 7.11 ERA over the small sample size of 6 1/3 innings pitched. Also slightly below replacement level. Like his durability, another right-handed arm that's probably a middle or long reliever. He could start for us in a pinch if we needed to. But with the fact that we've got 5 starters that we really like, and then with Schweitzer, Kennedy, Joss, McKinney, Colson, Reyes, and Guadron, we've got 7 relievers that we really like. As I look at this team, I think the only thing we might try to do in the offseason is perhaps package up some excess players and maybe try to bring a decent left-handed reliever on board. But had the best pitching staff in baseball this past year, and even with the potential loss of Valère, really like the way that this pitching staff sets up to hopefully be strong once again in 2041. And as I noted earlier, although it wasn't quite as impressive as our pitching staff, the offense also ended up being very strong when all was said and done. We'll take a look at the players on the injured list first. Phil Dingwell, former first-round pick, has really become a platoon player for us, playing primarily against left-handed pitching. Batting average dropped to .210 this year. Did have 10 home runs in 224 at-bats, but was still a below-average offensive player. Heading into an arbitration season where he's set to make about $7 million. Again, when we look at him, he's a guy we're fine playing against left-handed pitching, but $7 million for a guy who's a 4th or 5th outfielder is starting to get a bit expensive. Feel like outfield is a position where we may be a player or 2 short, depending on some of the other decisions we make this offseason. So from that perspective, Dingwell certainly in the mix to return for us next year. Jarrett Woods is a guy that we haven't seen in a year and a half at this point. He was an older rookie for us in 2038 when he finally got his opportunity, and he hit 248 with 18 homers and 66 ribbies. Was hitting just a .184 in 42 games in 2039 when he tore his PCL. Had some complications from that, and in addition to missing all of the rest of the 2039 season, missed all of this past season as well. So he's now 29 years old, hasn't played in the majors in a year and a half. Looking at his profile, I think it's borderline for him to make the roster. Positively, he still has 2 option years left, set to make around $2 million in arbitration. Tend to think we'll keep him around at that price as organizational depth. If he didn't have those option years left, it would be a much more difficult decision, but probably give him a chance to compete for a roster spot. But if I had to bet right now with some of the good young infielders we have in the organization, would think that Woods likely would be starting next year in AAA if everyone's healthy. Ryan Stone has had a really nice year with us, a really nice career with us. Did not have a good year with us. We exercised the final option of his 10-year contract that he signed when he was very young, and he proceeded to rupture his MCL in spring training, missed the entire year. So the left-hander, former first-round pick out of UVA, set to hit free agency. Given that his WRC pluses had fallen for a couple of years in a row, his WARs were declining, batting averages were declining, OPS was declining, and now he's missed a year, is older. Tend to think we move on from him. Not looking for a ton of money at this point. Only looking for $3.8 million a year for 2 years. And he is a left-handed hitter who we think can still be a pretty useful bat against right-handed pitching, but I think it may be time for us to finally move on from Stone, member of 6 World Championship teams with our team, 2-time All-Star, and a 5-time Playoff Series MVP award winner. So he was very productive for us at times. Part of the reason we could move on from him is the youngster John Jefferson, former 8th-round pick, missed half the season, unfortunately, after he tore his meniscus in early July. Hit 277 with 6 homers, 23 ribbies, and 202 at-bats. Put up a 119 WRC plus and a 1 WAR. The number 100 prospect in baseball should be recovered relatively soon from that torn meniscus. Fragile physically, and he is not great defensively, but he can play anywhere in the infield in a pinch. Don't know that I view him as a future superstar, but if he continues to develop his contact and his gap power, could be a pretty useful player for us for several years to come, and he should be competing for a roster spot next spring. Turning to the healthy position players, we've got Elliott Bedford for the 2nd straight year, was a late season call-up. Did get his first major league hit, but only had 2 at-bats in September. Certainly has a profile that he could be a useful backup catcher, like that he's durable. He is a guy who still has an option year left, and depending on what we do with the other catchers, he could find himself on the Albuquerque Express between New Mexico and Colorado if we have some injuries. Doug Hall we traded for from Seattle last offseason. He became the platoon part of our catching tandem, playing against left-handed pitching. Hit 254 in 177 at-bats, 6 homers, 29 ribbies. So he put up a 113 WRC plus for us, playing primarily or starting primarily against left-handed pitching, a WAR of close to 1. Kind of a good, solid season for a second catcher. The issue is he's expected to make little over $12 million in arbitration, and it may be a very expensive option if we're going to continue to view him as someone who's only going to have 150 to 200 at-bats a year. Fortunately, J.D. Lee, who we made a somewhat controversial re-signing of last offseason, had one of his better seasons for us. Hit 270 in 389 at-bats. Ultimately put up a 110 WRC plus and a 2.6 WAR. Solid defensive catcher. The left-handed hitter plays primarily against right-handed pitching, and he is signed for $19 million next year before he's got a player option. Could look to try to deal him at that number. I don't think there's going to be a ton of demand for him. I guess we can test that right now and see what type of market there might be if we shop him around. Given that I'm not expecting there to be much demand, and as we can see, no one's offering a single player in return for him in trade, and the fact that we're in a position where we don't have a ton of left-handed bats in our lineup for next year, tend to think that J.D. Lee will be back as our primary catcher next season. Turning now to the infielders, and as we talked about with the likes of Jarrett Woods and Ryan Stone and John Jefferson, we've got several options to consider who were on the injured list at the end of the season, in addition to all of these players that we're going to talk about now. So feel like infield is probably not a big focus for us in the trade market or the free agent market. I think you could argue that we've got maybe 7 or 8 guys to go into 6 likely infield spots when we're thinking about our 26-man roster for next year. Traded for Juan Silva from San Francisco to give us another left-handed bat. Hit only 217 for us. Did have 10 home runs and 230 at-bats. Only a 79 WRC plus. He was below replacement level. But between San Francisco and Colorado, he did steal 34 bases, and he is a guy, as we noted, a left-handed hitter who is, in theory, a more than competent offensive player against right-handed pitching. Even though we don't love his defense, we don't love his fragility, and he didn't hit much for us this year, I think we probably run it back with him next season just because we need some left-handed hitters in this lineup. Ted Slade, right-hander, former 15th round pick who's come up through our organization, improved significantly from his rookie year. Hit 247 with 12 homers and 158 at-bats, 113 WRC plus. Not great defensively, and he is a guy who is interesting against left-handed pitching, is borderline unplayable against right-handed pitching, even though he does have a little bit of home run pop against righties as well. He's a guy who still does have 2 option years left. Probably will be competing for a spot on the 26-man roster, but his defensive limitations could become an issue as we get to those decisions. One guy that there's no decision to make on is Johnny Castillo. 248 average this year, which is the worst of his career, and honestly the 29 home runs and the 94 ribbies that he had this season are also the worst figures he's put up in his 4-year major league career, but still rebounded from a slow start to be an above average offensive player with a 3.2 WAR. Definitely not as great as he was in his first 3 seasons when he won a Rookie of the Year, a couple of All-Star awards, and a couple of Silver Sluggers. But even though he's starting to get expensive, set to make over $12.5 million in arbitration, he certainly will be a second baseman for us next year and likely manning a spot towards the middle of our order. You can see he finished the year as our number 5 hitter against both lefties and righties. Alex Gamez, number 31 prospect in baseball, made his major league debut late this season after starting the year in Double-A. Hit 228 in 79 major league at-bats. Another guy who's versatile defensively. He ended up playing some right field for us when he ended up making it onto the playoff roster after some injuries. Still think there's some room for his bat to improve. He's going to be fighting for a roster spot next year. Mentioned that we've got a lot of talent in the infield, which could make it tricky to get him onto the roster. As I noted, we have played him in right field. Looking at his ratings, he could be a very mediocre right or left fielder for us defensively. But if his bat continues to develop, and that's a way for us to get him into the lineup and onto the roster, he could have a path as either a corner outfielder or an infielder onto the team, even though defensively he's much more interesting in the infield. Talked about the two-way player Jason House, fragile physically. Talked about his pitching stats earlier. Batting-wise, he hit .319 for us in 72 at-bats, so he was very productive with a 153 WRC plus in the limited opportunities he had at the major league level. The issues with House are he's going to be 32 years old, he's fragile physically, and he's also set to make $4 million in arbitration next year. Does have option years left, but when we think about the depth of the infielders that we have, no guarantees that he's going to make the 26-man roster. Are we willing to spend $4 million on a guy that's possibly going to start the year in AAA? That's a decision that we'll have to make. Another guy who's going to be a decision is Trent Kaysen. He was very productive for us this year. Ended up being our primary third baseman by the end of the season. Hit .245 with 24 homers and 91 ribbies. 104 WRC plus, 1.8 WAR. This was the most action that Kaysen has ever seen in the parts of 6 seasons that he spent with us in the majors this year, in part due to some of those injuries we talked about to the likes of Ryan Stone at first base, Jarrett Woods at third base. But Kaysen, to me, is not guaranteed a spot next year either. He's going to be almost 29 years old, and he's also set to make about $8 million in arbitration. You know, when we start thinking about some of these arbitration-eligible players like Kaysen, House, do we keep them around, or do we start turning things over to the younger guys like Gomez and John Jefferson? And those are the decisions we're going to have to make. But as I said, I feel like we've got a lot of good infielders, so I think the answers are on our roster right now. It's just a matter of kind of targeting the 6 players that we think will be on the team next year, and then perhaps, as I noted earlier, trying to use some of them in trade, maybe to bring on a left-handed reliever, maybe to bring on something different at catcher, or maybe to bring on some help in the outfield. Final 2 infielders, Derby Mahez, former first-round pick out of UCLA, hit .235 for us in 405 at-bats, did hit 15 home runs, 23 steals, 92 WRC plus, and a 2.2 WAR. Still a very gifted defensive player, popular with the fans, very good speed. Negatives are he's going to be 32 years old soon. He's fragile physically, and the bat is certainly nothing special. We've got him signed for $8.5 million next year. Tend to expect that we'll probably bring him back just because he's so good defensively, popular with the fans. You could certainly make an argument to move on from a Mahez and keep a Slade or a House or a Kaysen on the roster instead. But ultimately, given his popularity, his strong influence in the clubhouse, the really good defense he brings, view him as a guy who we'd consider as a utility infielder, maybe a starter for us against left-handed pitching. And then if we have some injuries, he could perhaps do what he did this past year and maybe start over 100 games for us, although I don't think that's necessarily the ideal. The last infielder we'll talk about is a little more similar to Johnny Castillo in that I don't think there's any question that he'll be on the team and any question as to what his role will be. Mentioned that Johnny Castillo is our second baseman, and our expectation is that Carlos Bear Barrel Davila, number 5 prospect in baseball, will be our starting shortstop next year. Hit 242, 26 doubles, 3 triples, 14 homers for us as a rookie. Also stole 10 bases, 87 WRC plus, so he wasn't great with the bat, but he wasn't awful. Put up a 3.2 WAR for us. Looking at his fielding statistics, range of over 4 at shortstop, 12.5 zone rating, defensive efficiency close to 1100. Don't know that he's going to win a Gold Glove as a rookie, but certainly put up statistics that he probably will be considered for one. So as I think broadly about the infield, we know that Castillo's at second base. We know that Davila's at shortstop. And then we got a lot of decisions to make with the likes of Derby Mahez, Trent Kaysen, Jason House, Alex Gamez, Ted Slade, Juan Silva, and as I mentioned earlier, also have Ryan Stone, Jarrett Woods, and John Jefferson in the mix. So feel really good about our infield and tend to think there might be some excess talent there that we could perhaps use to tempt somebody in the trade market. Last but not least, we will turn our attention to our outfielders, and this is where we have some decisions to make. Feel pretty confident that 3 of the 4 guys that we're going to talk about will be on our roster next year, but there's one who's definitely uncertain, and as we talked about earlier, Phil Dingwell also a little bit uncertain at this point. Mike Castro, the former first-round pick out of southeastern Louisiana, will definitely be back with us. Honestly, one of the least interesting offensive seasons he's ever had for us. You certainly could say it's the least interesting season period that he's ever had for us. The 4.2 WAR that he put up was the lowest of his career. The 119 WRC plus was the lowest of his career. But obviously with a 119 WRC plus and a 4.2 WAR was still a very productive player. Led the league in doubles for a second time with 46. Also had 6 triples, 10 homers, stole 19 bases. Very useful player for us. Love that he's durable and goes out, plays about 150 games a year for us. Castro certainly will be back with us next year. I think the question is whether he's a left fielder for us or whether we move him to center field if we move on from Anthony Pack Jr. You can see he did play a fair amount of center field for us this year and was above average in terms of his zone rating and his defensive efficiency. Eric Mokeen, another guy who almost certainly will be back with us, another outfielder who's durable, a rare left-handed hitter for our roster, a guy who's been a platoon guy for us since we picked him up. Play him against righties. He's typically been platooning with Phil Dingwell in the lineup, either at a left field or a DH spot. Hit 268 this year, 25 homers, 82 ribbies, 119 WRC plus, a 2.4 WAR. Mokeen still going to be making the major league minimum next year. Certainly envision him as a DH or left fielder for us against right-handed pitching, depending on some of the other decisions that we make. Mentioned that Dingwell's future is uncertain. I think I'm leaning towards probably bringing back Dingwell as a 4th outfielder for us and a guy who we can platoon with Mokeen and feel like we're going to get some pretty solid offense from both of them. Anthony Pack Jr. is the other decision that we have to make. He's been our starting center fielder for 7 years now since we picked him up in a trade with Washington. But it may be time to move on. We've got a team option for $9 million for him for next year. He's going to be 34 years old. He's fragile physically. Still one of the best base runners in the National League. Still very good defensively with that 70 outfield range. But the batting average over the last 3 years has dropped from 275 to 237 to a $1.99 this past season. Put up just a 58 WRC plus. He is a left-handed hitter, but even against right-handed pitching, looks like he's a slightly below average major league hitter at this point. And given his age, kind of expect that this might be the time for us to try to save some money and maybe move on from Pack Jr. That will put more demands defensively on Castro, as I noted. He is not as good in center field as Pack Jr., but certainly can handle the position. So right now I'm kind of envisioning Castro in center, Mokeen and Dingwell in a platoon at left, and Kevin Roberts Jr. in right field, while moving on from Anthony Pack Jr. and opening up an outfield spot that we could perhaps look to the trade market or the free agent market to fill. Or, as I talked about earlier, there are some infielders who we could potentially transition into more of an outfield role, particularly if we don't necessarily need them to be out there every day. The right fielder, we know, as long as he's healthy, will be Mr. Five Tools, Kevin Roberts Jr., the 32-year-old, three-time most valuable player. Probably will get some MVP award votes this year. Don't know that he'll actually pick up a fourth National League MVP for us, but he did have a very strong season, the fifth 30-30 season of his career. Scored 100 runs, finished with 30 homers and 86 ribbies. Led the National League in stolen bases for the first time at age 32 with a career-high 49. Also led the National League in on-base percentage and led the National League with a 6.7 WAR while putting up a 148 WRC plus. Mr. Five Tools signed only at this point for another couple years, $20 million a year for the next 2 seasons, and then we'll need to figure out a way to keep the franchise icon with us in all probability. But not something we need to worry about right now. Certainly envision Kevin Roberts Jr. being back as our cleanup hitter and everyday right fielder when all is said and done next season. So as I noted, feel pretty good about the pitching staff. Maybe we need to look for a left-handed reliever. Feel like we've got plenty of infielders coming back next year. So when we think about position players, pretty comfortable that given the dearth of left-handed hitters, particularly if we move on from Anthony Pack Jr., that J.D. Lee will be back as our primary catcher. So the question is, do we go with Mr. Hall or Mr. Bedford as a backup catcher, or perhaps try to find a catcher on the free agent market or in the trade market? And then what do we ultimately do in the outfield? As I mentioned, with Mokeen, Castro, and Roberts Jr., feel like we've got 3 guys whose spots are not in question. The big question is, what do we do with Anthony Pack Jr., and what do we also do with Phil Dingwell? Quick look, obviously way too early here with a few weeks to go about the upcoming free agents. Pitching-wise, some pretty talented starting pitchers potentially on the market. Also talked about our buddy Adonis Valer. Looks like Antonio Fuentes could be one of the more interesting left-handed relievers, although don't necessarily love the low adaptability and work ethic. Maybe the trade market would be a way for us to find another lefty if we decide that's a direction for us to go. Clearly some very high-quality starting pitchers on the market, although that's not necessarily a need of ours. Taking a look at some of the potential hitters on the market, and Jalen Smith, outstanding player. Don't love some of the personality quirks that he has, but a two-time Gold Glove winner who's a four-time All-Star and a three-time Silver Slugger, only 28 years old. Eli Smith certainly going to get a lot of attention on the open market. Don't know that we need infielders, but second base Mike Cotney Higham, outstanding defensively, good speed, and a really interesting bat. He is a MVP award winner in the American League from last year and a five-time All-Star, couple of Silver Sluggers for the Astros. PCA still kicking around at the age of 38, although he's recovering from a torn hamstring. If we were just looking for another left-handed hitter, he still can hit the ball pretty well against right-handed pitching. The issues are he's going to be 39 years old and he's wrecked physically, and he's probably going to be looking for some pretty significant money. But he could be a interesting option for us if we wanted to look for an outfielder on the free agent market. Certainly other players also to consider. Dave Carbajal, certainly a solid hitter, very good speed, good infield range, would give us a left-handed bat. With the money that he's likely to be looking for, kind of think we probably stick with Silva, the guy that we traded for at the middle of last season. But there's definitely some infielders and some outfielders who are going to be potentially on the market. You can see our old buddy Ted Miller. We'll talk about him next episode in more depth when we do a review of some of our former players, but he could be available as well. Catcher doesn't look like a particularly rich position on the market. The right-handed hitter, Eddie Javier, probably the most interesting guy out there. Outstanding with blocking and above average with his framing. Righty could definitely be a very interesting platoon player with Lee. But I tend to think he's probably going to also be pretty expensive as a 30-year-old three-time All-Star who's the best catcher on the market. So plenty more time for us to think about all of the different permutations. I'll certainly spend some time offline reviewing some of the options that we can try to pursue in the trade market, but not feeling like we have a ton of holes to fill at this point. Would love some thoughts from the Worldwide Scouting Department after you've watched and listened to this review as to what you think the right strategy and the right decisions would be on some of the questions we have ahead of us for this offseason. As always, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.